And that's the Dubois family, which, if people didn't already know, they certainly know now, has got rather a fracture running within it. We initially spoke to Caroline Dubois probably around a year ago outside the McGuigan gym, and she told us that she doesn't speak to her dad at the moment. She didn't go into great detail about why. Then I obviously interviewed Stan Dubois, Dave Dubois, call him what you want. Well, not what you want, especially not on here. And we went into detail over an hour, and he talked about why, in his view, the relationship between himself and his daughter or one of his daughters had broken down. And then most notably and most recently, Eamon went to Shane McGuigan's gym and got a chance to speak with Caroline Dubois for an episode of his new unscripted series. And kudos to Eamon. I'd just like to add my respect to the mass adoration Eamon's received in recent times for the Caroline Dubois interview, which was superb, I think, by any stretch of the imagination. In my view, one of the best interviews we've ever had on the Seconds Out channel. I urge you, if you haven't already watched it, to go and do so. Or if you have, please do so again, not until this podcast has finished. But in which she went into great detail about her reasons for moving out of the family home and for no longer having a relationship with either her father or with her older brother, Daniel Dubois. In fact, she didn't even watch his victory over Anthony Joshua. Eamon, I guess, first of all, talking about this, what did you make of Caroline's mindset and approach when talking about such a sensitive subject?
She seemed very confident and she seemed very assured in what she was saying. And I thought that was a real credit to her, who'd obviously been to a lot. And I gauge from, just to put myself in her shoes for a brief second, that she'd obviously been through a lot. This has been through her head numerous times, and she must have kind of thought about how she'd approach it. And when maybe she thought about it a few times, it would lend her to becoming emotional about it. But as time went on, she got more confident and where she stood with things and how she's grown and the independence she's gained, that she's made the right decision with things, that she's made the right choice to remove herself from the situation, and she's made the right choice to, as was her choice, to speak out about it. I thought it was lovely to hear someone so just confident and just free speaking, is unreserved in the way that they thought and felt about things. I thought she'd come across really well, and it's in those interviews where I know you're giving me the praise there, and I know this isn't what you're saying, but it's the praises and the kind of gratitude, I guess, is to the interviewee for sharing that real private moment, that real private part of their life and their history, but also to celebrate as well, kind of just that kind of journey that they've been. And journey is a cliche word, but it was, and I felt that when she kind of answered the question, she spoke for a long time, that this was really like a difficult period of her life that she'd condensed down into 8 or 9 or 10 minutes as she replied back, and trying to kind of give the people her side of the story. And even then, understanding as well too that people will hear her father's side, people will hear her side, and she can't win everyone over. She had a full understanding and maturity. That's the word I've been looking for as I've been speaking. A maturity to the situation, a maturity to the understanding of how people might react to the situation, but also the maturity to kind of take onus of the situation and want to speak out. So full of only pure admiration for Caroline, and I thank her for her trust in myself and in Seconds Out to get that across her point of view.
Yeah, I found the reaction to it gratifying for the most part, especially all the kind of compliments on how sensitively you handled the situation. But there was kind of a stream running through the feedback that disappointed me. And there was a lot of people criticizing a little bit us for talking about the issue in the first place. And to that, I'd say that Caroline was keen to have her right of reply after, the interview with her father had become incredibly popular in the build-up to the Joshua fight. But also a lot of criticism of Caroline herself for, as some people saw it, certainly on the YouTube feedback, airing dirty laundry in public, which I really didn't like. You've got a young woman who's, from her own, what she said, was often silenced, not allowed to be her true self as she was growing up with her father. And society as a whole has often, silenced women, especially ones they deem as troublesome or a threat to the patriarchy. I don't want to go into too much detail there, primarily because I'm not that well versed on the subject. But I don't think it's right to then try and shut Caroline down when she's saying what she really believes. It's obviously taken a lot of bravery, a lot of courage to get to this point. It's not easy to move out of the family home with a couple of your younger siblings when your father and his teachings, his way of raising you is all you've ever known. And she's been brave enough to do that, and now brave enough to talk about it. And only did she talk about it in detail when her father had done so in a previous interview. So I endorse what Eamon said. I think full credit to Caroline for speaking about it. I also made that clear to her personally or directly as well. But yeah, I don't think it's right. All these people saying, well, your father's, you'll never get that relationship back if you talk about it publicly. No, I mean, if Dave Stan was happy to talk about it publicly, and he was, I didn't force it out of him, then there's no reason why Caroline should get her side of the story out as well. And the feedback overall has been positive, predominantly positive. So yeah, I mean, I was disappointed by some of the naysayers, and not because it's criticizing content on Seconds Out, but because it's basically telling young woman who's already been through a hell of a lot to not tell her story. And I don't think it's anyone's right to do that. I think the only person that gets to decide whether to open up about something so sensitive is the person themselves, and in this case, Caroline Dubois. Let's just have a look at what the chat's saying. Brace myself for more criticism, perhaps. Cuss's System says, Eamon, also a very good interview with Duke McKenzie, which is a great watch. DB Coupon says, I can see why Shane McGuigan chose to stay with Caroline over Daniel now, despite the huge heavyweight money on offer. Respect Shane a lot for that. Good man. I actually spoke to a notable figure in boxing. I'm not going to say who it was because he hasn't said I can say this on camera yet. But he probably will be on the channel soon anyway. But he said he's got huge respect for Shane McGuigan, despite not always getting on with him on a personal level, primarily because he could have chosen Daniel rather than Caroline, and instead helped set Daniel up with Don Charles and stuck by Caroline, which I think, says a lot about the man himself. Nat says, the Caroline Dubois interview was great. I really like her as a person, and she came across so well. Fantastic talent too. Props to Eamon well in the sensitive way he handled it. Thunder Road says, a big part of your business is relationships. Eamon has a good rapport with Caroline. She was very comfortable. Danny used to have a relationship with Lou DiBella, but it's apparently gone now. Yeah, I mean, we keep trying to kind of revive DiBella's Digest. And we haven't fallen out. We still talk and everything. But every time we kind of do it, we set a time and then it doesn't happen. And I just think Lou's a lot busier than he was previously. Or maybe he just does hate me and just hasn't had the, I can't imagine Lou would ever hold back. But maybe he just hasn't had the time to tell me yet. Fizz says they love the interview. Sultan Ibrahimov said it was a good interview, but have to be careful when driving a wedge into family ties. But in my opinion, Caroline is a grown woman, so understands what the interview could do. Yeah, I mean, I don't think, if anything, I know you're not saying this, but I don't think we're driving a wedge into anything. I think the wedge is already very much there. I think as soon as Caroline made the decision, and her siblings did too, to leave the family home, I think that relationship, I'm not saying it's irreparable. I'm not sure any relationship's ever truly irreparable, but certainly became fractured, and I can't see them making up anytime soon. But yeah, I mean, I guess bringing it to the public, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and claim that it's of great public interest and we had a duty to report it. We didn't, but it was something that Stan brought up when I interviewed him, and it was something that Caroline very much wanted to talk about, having seen her father's account and disagreeing vehemently with it, as anyone who's seen the interview will know. James Salter says, I think Dubois done brilliant, was a big performance. Joshua got the shock of his life, should have been stopped early, I think. Yeah, so one of the things that I would say as well is that the kind of fractured relationship between Caroline and Daniel Dubois is one that that's the one that kind of is more poignant for me. And that's not because, I've got no sympathy for the father-daughter thing, but just the fact that Daniel wasn't really, Caroline doesn't hold him as having done anything wrong, particularly in the situation. She's not blaming him for the way in which she was raised or the end of the relationship with her father. It's just the case that he stayed at home. He's still, Stan Dubois is still very much a part of Daniel Dubois' team and his career and his life. and that's meant that the siblings are no longer speaking to each other. And I think that's a great shame about this whole thing. Eamon, there's also the issue of Don Charles's relationship with Stan Dubois, something that was brought into stark focus in the week leading up to the Joshua fight, in which Spencer Fearon, I think it was, claimed that there was a rift between the two, and that's why we weren't seeing Don Charles during fight week. As it turned out, he was ill with the flu. He was in bed for most of fight week, was there on fight night, and has talked a lot since the fight about the kind of misinformation going around. What do you make of, because you've spoken to Don at length previously, what did you make of Don's kind of attitude both before and after the fight?
Yeah, look, I mean, it all seems to, that whole situation with Don and his illness, I think there should have been a bit more of a care as to what the media were kind of going with and the questions that were being asked surrounding that. I don't think anyone really fact checked it or bothered to ask kind of if they had a connection to Don Charles or otherwise. At least people that are active on the scene didn't seem to do that and just kind of ran with the story because the story was of interest. And I guess the facts get in the way of a good story here. But you know, in that fight week, I reached out to someone who knew Don Charles very well. And just asked them what's the case here, and they said there's nothing to it. He's just bedbound with the flu. I didn't feel that duty. I'm not really that guy that then puts out like, "Hey, this is all rubbish. Don Charles got the flu. Carry on." I don't really feel like I'm a Benson in that way or someone else. And then I think in the morning, Chris McKenna, good journalist that he is, he then put it out. So I was like, all right, sweet. Someone's put it out there, and it can kind of be put to rest here. But there are kind of those rumors that were running around about kind of the camp and things like that. But then I saw that little clip of like when they were celebrating in the corner, and Stan Dubois, who's also very particular and very chooses his words particularly, and has a reason behind every word that he speaks. At least that's what I got from your interview with him, Danny. He then said, he said, well done to Don Charles. Like he made a mention to go over to Don and say, well done. And Don took, I was like, yes, like that was like the moment he'd kind of been waiting for. And he's like, I love you, like kind of thing. And you don't express love for someone, if you don't have that back. So I don't know, maybe a lot has been made of kind of the whispers that have been kind of going around about the camp. And maybe it isn't as fractious as people may make it out to be. At least that's kind of my finger on the pulse of it right now. But what's more of interest at the moment is Don Charles's kind of reaction to things. And now that Don has kind of had his crowning moment, his moment where he's guided Daniel Dubois to victory over Anthony Joshua, he's kind of taken the moment where his voice is the loudest to say his piece and to say how. And I thought it was actually really poignant. It's a good word you said earlier, Danny. Poignant. It's a real good word to use in respect of Don Charles, who, he said, "Look, this industry has crushed me. Like I was never handed anything. I was never given anything." I can't remember he quite said this, but to paraphrase him and put me in his shoes for a moment, he was never given these blue chip prospects or given these opportunities, and now that he's guided someone to, and he's guided other fighters to different levels of the pyramid to success, he's finally been given someone, and he's shown what he can do with someone who has big profile, has big capabilities, and he's a safe pair of hands to guide someone with the experiences that he has. And he's used that moment as well too to kind of dig out a few people and just say, look, you didn't back me, your job here is to look at this and look at that, but you got it wrong. You kind of overlooked me and what I do and looked at this side of things. And I think it's fair for Don to say his piece. I think a couple of people and the boxing fraternity, the boxing public might say to Don, look, maybe just reel it in a little bit, because you don't want to. The goodwill is all towards you right now. You don't want to spoil that. But I kind of feel like, look, Don, say your piece. Don't feel like you have to be filtered in any way. If that's the way you feel, then be the way you feel. And I feel like it's I appreciate Don's honesty in wanting to say what he's said so far in the aftermath of everything, because he has been overlooked by the industry, and as well too, like this is an industry where, and I think Don's been really good because I've had the opportunity to go through his doors and see what he does in a training camp, and how he sets up his fighters, and how he sets up his training camps, and what he wants from his fighters, and how he calls things out, and how he helps grow fighters. I've been able to see that, whereas many in the industry kind of don't do that. So you get an idea and reflection when people could kind of saying, "Oh, this fella said, oh, Eamon was picking AJ over Dubois." No, this is one of the reasons. This is why I was picking Dubois over AJ, because I've seen what he does. I've seen how he operates, and I have the confidence in him to have done the job on the opponent on that night. I wish a lot more trainers would do a similar sort of thing than that Don would, but he's also of a different generation too. He's old school. He won't be denied. He's persevered here, and he's got his moments. So let Don say whatever he wants, because I think he's earned that moment.
Yeah, I completely agree. Stephen says, has Stan Dubois contacted Seconds Out to discuss what Caroline said? Life is too short. Hopefully Caroline and Stan have a grown-up conversation soon. No, I haven't heard from Stan. Obviously, he's got my number. I did consider reaching out to him, but it seems like maybe a bit too soon after the fight and after Caroline's interview. But yeah, watch this space, I guess. So